Trillions of dollars that the federal government approved in COVID-19 relief going to a variety of places, from the private sector to the public sector, and governments all up and down the board using these dollars to fund a variety of things, from replacing pandemic-era losses and tax revenue to helping with the healthcare sector. Illinois in particular, I think in public and private, there was like $160 billion that was sent. The state government itself getting more than $8 billion. That's just state government, let alone all the school districts and the universities and the local governments. I think Springfield City Council is still sitting on like $19 million from that pandemic era relief. But these one-time relief dollars, how much more of it is left, and how should governments using your tax dollars maybe change their budgeting priorities to ensure that they don't go off a fiscal cliff? Let's now talk with Beverly Bunch. She is a professor at the University of Illinois Springfield, also writing for the Volcker Alliance, and they put out a report this week called On the Edge, Balancing Budgets in a Post-Pandemic World. Beverly, thanks for taking time with us this morning.
It's a pleasure to be here, Greg.
So I guess just give us the kind of overview of what your report delves into.
Good. The Volcker Alliance is in New York City. It's a nonprofit organization founded by Paul Volcker, and they really try to track and improve state budgeting practices. So they've looked at them over time, and most recently they asked us to look at how the states are spending this large influx of federal fiscal recovery funds. And the main concern they had, and we share, is whether states are using these one-time funds for recurring programs, and to the extent they are, what happens when the federal funds no longer are available.
So obviously, a lot of those federal funds still floating around out there. I mentioned in the city of Springfield, there's like $19 million that they say are already allocated, but they're still being included in their cash reserves, so to speak. Illinois, how we look, $8+ billion just for Illinois state government. So have we expended all of that? Did the state government use it on one-time things, or was there a bit of, fudging of the numbers? All funds are fungible, right? So did they just offset some other costs with this one-time federal tax fund?
And those things are really hard to track. Our report is based on data as of 2022, and I have reviewed Illinois' 2023 numbers and referred to those in footnotes. And Illinois is fluid. They've been moving money around a lot. But let's talk about what most recently they've done. So one thing they've done that's really strong is they've got $4.0 billion going to repay unemployment trust funds. And that's, as you know, unemployment soared during the pandemic, and many states, including Illinois, borrowed from the federal government to meet those needs. And so if they didn't pay that off, then a tax would be imposed by the federal government. So that was prudent. That's a one-time use. And when we looked at it initially, it was 2.7, and now more recently, it's $4 billion.
Wow. And obviously still concerns there because, that comes with having to, cover the unemployment insurance taxes that employers pay, but also the concern was if they don't pay this off, this debt, those taxes would increase, benefits would be reduced. So we watched all that unfold at the State House. But that's half of the $8 billion. What's Illinois looking like moving forward? We've got a statement from the governor's office I do want to get your response to, saying that it's, quote, time the budget experts and the press catch up with the times and stop using old assumptions that Illinois is on the brink of fiscal calamity at all times. Is that your assumption in the report, that Illinois is on the brink of fiscal calamity?
I don't think we're in the projection business. We do not want states to fall off the cliff. What we're trying to do is raise concerns for states like Illinois and other states who are using funds for recurring purposes. So Illinois used $1.8 billion, which is about 3.4% of their fiscal 22 spending for recurring cost. And that quote is correct. That's happened in the past, but not too long ago, just in the year that ended in June. And then we saw in that month of June, the state transferred $300 million federal funds into the budget. So it's not in the fiscal 24 budget, but it was the month before. And then there's also another $1 billion transfer that I'm still trying to figure out and coming in from the federal funds and then was transferred back. So as you know, budgeting is tricky in terms of trying to track it. The state is trying to be transparent. The governor prepares a report on the use of funds and gives it to the legislature. But even myself, who look at budget figures daily, that report is not always very clear to me.
Yeah, and even you got to imagine the taxpayers out there wanting to track how their tax dollars are being used, either state tax dollars or federal tax dollars. It makes it kind of cumbersome for the ability to track all of that. We're talking with Beverly Bunch. She is a professor at the University of Illinois Springfield, writing for the Volcker Alliance, a report on the edge, balancing budgets in a post-pandemic world. You talk about 38 states that face a low risk of possibly encountering a fiscal cliff of sorts. What are they doing right, or what did they do right?
Right. And I don't want to say right versus wrong. I mean, we're focusing on fiscal sustainability, which is one criteria. And there's lots of criterias in terms of allocating these funds, helping those most in need, helping businesses, helping individuals. So a lot of states are doing that, helping the healthcare industry, helping to get the workforce. And be quite frank, Illinois has done that too. Illinois got over $300 million, I got my things straight, going into small businesses. And so I think the main thing is to track the recurring cost and have a plan for what happens when the funds run out. And these funds, they have to be obligated by 2024 and spent by 2026. And that's part why Illinois is moving funds around. They're being prudent in noticing that, hey, if we can't get these funds spent, we may have to give them back. And so that's why I think they initially paid that unemployment trust fund with state funds and then said, no, let's use the federal funds to reimburse the state funds.
There's a lot of pressures in Illinois. About 1 of every 5 tax dollars the state takes in is going to pensions. Then you've got another, $10 billion going to K through 12 schools. That's 2/5 of the budget right there, let alone all these state agencies and the cost for personnel. But you've got other things that have really compounded the budget, and even the governor recognizing this in rules that he modified for non-citizens getting health care. He essentially lifted the cap from 42 and up to 65 and up for who's going to be subsidized for health care, taking that cost from 1 point some odd billion to $550 million. But even that's a cost that's going to compound the budget. How does that play into, I guess, all of the factors and the pressures in a budget? How does that play into Illinois and looking at a potential fiscal cliff?
Yeah, I think you raise a good point. It's not just loss of these federal funds, it's what else is happening. And Illinois is certainly making progress in paying down its debt, but as you know, they still have a very large unfunded pension liability. And I guess, the other major thing out there is what's going to happen to the economy. The past year's been strong for Illinois and other states. They've been able to build up their reserves, although Illinois is still quite low relative to other states. But the Volcker Alliance had a webinar last week, and it was pretty much the majority opinion of the panelists that things are slowing down, and indeed there could be a recession in 2024. I mean, you never know what's going to happen, but I think it's when these different factors all sort of occur at the same time where we see the challenges the states face.
And your assessment of why we didn't necessarily go into that recession in the past year, as a lot of speculation was it interest rates? Was it the Fed and releasing more dollars, changing the balance on the spreadsheet type of thing? Is that sustainable?
When I think, it's hard on those issues. Also, having inflation help the sales tax be higher. And so whether or not we'll go into recession, who knows? But the states do what's called stress testing and think about different scenarios and say, if we do go into recession, how are we going to cope with it? And that's what we recommend in our paper, to do stress testing, to do multi-year forecasting, and try to have a plan.
And let's talk a little bit more about those recommendations that you guys lay out after the break, if you can stay with us. All right, so we're talking with Beverly Bunch. She is a professor at the University of Illinois Springfield, writing for the Volcker Alliance, a report out this week on the edge, balancing budgets in a post-pandemic world. So stay tuned. Back talking with Beverly Bunch, a professor at the University of Illinois Springfield and author and researcher with the Volcker Alliance, putting out a report about avoiding a fiscal cliff, especially now that you've got COVID-19 relief dollars that are going to be drying up if they haven't already dried up and are used, and the impacts on a state like Illinois. Beverly, I want to get your reaction to some more of what the governor provided to Capital Facts, a political blog. They pushed back on your report, saying that it's outdated. You're basing it off of outdated information. They say that it's based off of 2 years that have already passed, but they claim fiscal year 24 general fund budget balance is balanced and does not use any of those federal recovered dollars for the budget. So they say Illinois is already beyond the theoretical cliff and the hypothetical situation analyzed by the Volcker report. So your reaction to that?
Well, I think Illinois is a good place now, and I guess the question is what's going to happen in the future, and in particular if revenues were to decline. I talked to a friend in New York, and he said, yeah, we haven't hit the cliff yet because revenues are real strong. And as long as revenues are strong, then the state can replace those federal funds and everybody will be content. But the question is, what if that's not the case? And so I wish Illinois well. I hope their revenue projections are correct. But we'll see. I think that there's a lot of gray out there.
Well, and also you got to consider, too, I mean, the cost of inflation, normal goods are going up, the sales taxes on those as well. Right. That's providing some kind of cushion, right?
And we've had the federal funds circulating out in the economy, the money that they pumped in through the individual payments we got and through aid to businesses, and those are in the economy. And to what extent has that been pumping up revenues, and what will happen when that's no longer there?
Beverly, I can't imagine. I look at Illinois budget numbers from time to time, and feels I got to put on some ambient music in the background and a cup of coffee, and then just delve into it, just pages and pages, scores of pages. I can't imagine doing this for all 50 states. Talk about the challenges that posed.
It is very challenging. Everybody does their budgets a little different. Their level of transparency varies. Fortunately, we had a great team. One of my colleagues, Patty Burns, an economics professor, as well as two students, Abigail Sue and Nathan Schleiden. But even then, with the four of us working through and trying to code these different line items for all 50 states, it was challenging. But we'd meet and talk and reach a consensus and document what we did. So we feel good about the product.
And again, a lot of lines of data and trying to hunt down the comprehensive financial annual reports and for all the states and pouring